How's that? Okay? All right. The Chosen, episode 6. How many watched? Just curious. Okay, so we had a great discussion. There's incredible stuff. I want to try and frame this, though, where even if you didn't get to watch it, you can vividly tell what the story is. I did up here, there are about 6 scenes, and we won't get to cover everything in any one of them. There's so much there. But understand that this is kind of where we'll be. You know, if we get to about here and we got 5 minutes left, it's really going to have to race through to the end. So, but I want a lot of input from you guys tonight because it is, I think it's a wonderful story, a wonderful set of stories in each of these scenes. First, I want to call your attention to here. You remember last time, I think last time I did it or somebody did, I believe it was me, but I can't remember. The opening, every opening in season 5, there are 8 episodes, but every one of them starts with a segment of the Last Supper. Remember? And then they have the theme song and music and so forth, and then it goes right into it. But it drove me crazy at first until I read in some of the notes that Nathan had given us that they split the Last Supper up into 8 different segments, because there are 8 different episodes. And the first one that introduced the whole series, the whole season, episode 1, was the last scene. And it goes, so the Last Supper, as we progress through, see episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it starts 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Gives a segment, and then it backs up and gives a segment, and backs up and gives a segment. It's backwards. That drove me crazy at first, but I started to understand that I was seeing things in each particular episode, even when it's out of order. It recalled to me, well, this should be there, but I've already seen the end at the beginning. Isn't that crazy? Now, Kathy went online and found on YouTube, if you have access to YouTube on your phone or whatever, you can search on YouTube a place called The Chosen Watcher. And somebody has gone to the trouble of The Chosen Watcher to lift all 8 episodes of The Last Supper in season 5 and put them in the right order. So you can go, and it'll take you about 45 or 50 minutes because each one of them is significant. But if it's driving you nuts to know what goes on, like, for example, there was earlier in the season, earlier about episode 6 or so, you looked up when everybody was around that horseshoe table, and somebody said, the 12 of you I have gathered tonight, or something like that, and one of them said 11. Yeah. And you counted, and Judas was already gone. Because Judas, the previous week, Jesus said, go do what you're going to do. And he got up and ran out. Well, everything is coming to a head. I just thought that would be interesting for you. If you want to do that, spoiler alert, 1 and 2 will blow your mind. But then when you get it right up there and hook them up with episode 7 and 8, then it'll all make sense that way. So look at it like that. Okay? All right, so they call that a cold opening, or a cold open. Every time you get something before the theme song, that opens up any show. The cold open is something that starts. So the Last Supper is the occasion for every cold open. This one is real interesting. Had it occurred to you, do you know how many things were crammed into this one? It seems like the longest Last Supper episode that we've seen so far. I got to looking at Scripture, and I had never seen it before, and I wasn't raised with this. So many of those things that Jesus said, I thought, that wasn't during the Last Supper. I've heard that in John chapter whatever forever today, but I had no idea it was placed there. They really must be scrambling things around, but I got to looking. As far as Scripture is concerned, from the time when Jesus told his disciples, go into the city, find me a donkey, and come bring it back, and then go find an upper room, and this is where we're going to have it. You remember all that preparation? Then he washed their feet, and then all the things that happened down through there. All that occurs, the record of that occurs, if you're doing a harmony of the gospel, in Matthew chapter 26. It's all contained in there. Mark chapter 14. And if you've got a harmony of the Gospels, I've got an NIV harmony of the Gospels that's 20 years old or so. They don't do them too often because they're, but it shows, as best scholars can tell, the story chronologically and which Gospel writer reports on it. Okay? Luke, we know Mark is the shortest of the Gospels, right? Luke is the longest of the Gospels and has some of the longest chapters in the New Testament. Luke chapter 22. All contained right there. John hasn't kicked in yet. John doesn't give us any of the episodes, any of the events that are within these 3 chapters. John, however, gives us, get this right, chapter 13 through 17. 5 chapters in the book of John have to deal with the Last Supper. And within that, and so it is called, in a lot of circles, the farewell discourse. And you could tell that when they were gathered around the table, because Jesus has given his last word to them. I'm not going to be with you much longer. There's a betrayer among you. What? There's all kinds, and he says, I'm the vine, you're the branches. I've heard that all my life preached, but I didn't know that was at the table of the Last Supper. There's a couple of spots in there. At the end of chapter 4, he said, let us get up and go. But the official, that conflicts with chapter 18, verse 1, because we go through 17. 18, verse 1, where it says, they got up and they went across the Kidron Valley, or the Kidron Brook, up into the Mount of Olives. So some scholars think that first 14, chapter 14, verse, whatever the last verse is, 31, I believe, he's really saying, let's go now. And a lot of what went on in chapters 15, 16, and 17, all that, he told them on the way as they were walking through the city. Now, whether they stayed in that same upper room, we don't know. But en route to pray on the Mount of Olives, they could have done that. But when they crossed the valley, very short order, here come people with torches and clubs and swords to carry him away after his prayer 3 times. It just, if we're going to know the Word and know it as a story, it would be so interesting to read Matthew and Mark and Luke and see the similarities, but then go and read John and don't stop until chapter 18. That's what we're talking about, this whole thing. The true vine, full and complete joy I leave you. There is a betrayer among them. And then you know that they kind of went nuts. Who is it? Who in the world is it? Peter said, who? And Z, the former zealot, the military man, said, you tell us who it was and we'll make him wish he never was born. Instantly you saw that, because this so blew their minds, this was going to be a joyous, happy occasion. But what had Jesus been doing up until now? He tore up the temple, the temple market, and made things really, really difficult for all the merchants. It's the occasion where he called the people from the Sanhedrin, the high chief poobahs that came out to say, you can't do this, this is against the law. He said, you brood of vipers, you bunch of snakes. And so here, then he starts really upsetting his own disciples. Because when you're in with a group, you don't expect your leader to turn and say, one of you is a traitor. And he's doing it with sorrow in his eyes. You could tell he's on the verge of tears the whole time. But it's time for the truth. And yet, part of the reason they are so upset is because somebody wants in. Because they don't understand what's going on. Why is he making enemies? Why does everybody he turn around to, and why is he telling us there's a betrayer? I thought we were all on the same side here. And then at the end, there's a vision of John the Baptist. Do you remember when Jesus looked up, this open horseshoe, he's the head. Very interesting, John, whom we know at one point laid his head on Jesus' chest and said, who is it? And Jesus, we've already seen that part of the Last Supper. He said, and he whispers to him, who's on his left? Judas. He was given the place of second honor. And if you'll notice throughout this part, Jesus maybe one time looked at Judas. He looked at John, he looked around the room, he made eye contact, but especially the point where he said, one of you will betray me. He never laid an eye on Judas after that. And Judas is wondering, what is going on? I'm on his side. Doesn't he understand? We'll talk about that in a minute. But then he sees who? Jesus looks up and smiles with tears in his eyes, and he sees John the Baptist sitting there. It's a vision. Why did that happen? In this storytelling, we don't know that it happened. There's no record of it in Scripture, but think about how this puts pieces together. In Malachi 4, 5, and 6, the last two verses in the Old Testament, God said, behold, I send forth Elijah. And in Matthew 17, 10 through 12, Jesus told his disciples, you said Elijah is coming. Indeed, he is coming. As a matter of fact, he did come. He was John the Baptist. That was Elijah. When did we celebrate the Seder meal here in this room? Was it just before Easter of this year?
Yes, sir.
Was there not an empty chair for Elijah? And in this telling, John the Baptist, Elijah, for Jesus' comfort and strength, again, in this presentation, was sitting in Elijah's chair. I know who it is. It's Judas. Later, he was taking money out of the community. But for all like a Navy SEAL on an enemy on the battlefield, and Peter too. But he couldn't give it away. There's tension in the room because of that, Joyce.
Didn't they, in a previous episode, they were talking when Judas had already left?
Yes.
And they were talking, the apostles were talking among themselves and said, well, where'd Judas go? And they said, oh, I think you're supposed to give a gift for the poor at Passover time. I think he just took our money to go. So they were even...
That was up in here.
Yeah, and they were not even suspicious. They didn't even
No.
talk about it. They thought he went to go do there.
None of them could conceive that any of them could be a betrayer after the 3 years they had just experienced. Guard your faith, brothers and sisters. You never know. And we don't live precariously, in fear that are just going to wake up one day and not have faith. But Judas didn't know what he was going to do until it was too late, and he followed through and did it. That's my opinion. He didn't plot to steal. He innocently did it. Maybe was going to put it back. I remember that episode not in a previous season when he did that. And Matthew called him on it, said, this is not right. What's going on? And he told another apostle, I can't remember who it was, but so they kind of got it calmed down, and he, made some excuse and moved around. But that seed was already in his heart. He brought it in the door with him from what he had been prior to meeting Jesus. We need to be careful. We need to guard our faith. There were accusations among the disciples. There was mistrust, and it broke out among all of them. Well, finally, Jesus saw what was happening, and he sat down and said, okay, we're going to continue. And then he took the bread, and he broke it, and he gave it to all of them. And it was unleavened bread, so we in the Church of Christ are real good on that point. And he said, why was this done to begin with? Why are we doing this at this meal? Do you remember?
They were told they didn't have time for the bread to rise.
That's right. This reminded us of, because this is to remind us of the night God delivered us and drew us out of Egypt. And here's the cup. The cup. I have relatives who said, and he took the cup. And churches split over that kind of silliness. But everybody drank from the cup. And he said, this is my body. Was he saying, this becomes my body, literal flesh, when you put it in?
It's a symbol.
By the way, I needed to see you, Joel, Joel, right there. Yeah, the guy in the green shirt, Joel, right there. Yeah. With the crazy radar on him, whatever. I'd like to see you right after this is over with. He's back there. I said, does it turn into? And he's going, we're going to have some theological stuff going on here. And then he said, this is my blood. Was he saying this turns into red and white corpuscles that flows through your body? No. But for some reason, that made it clear to me that it wasn't just a clinical discussion like there would be among scholars or in the Sanhedrin about arguing over the last jot and tittle in the law. Well, it can't be. It's just symbolic. But it really says it really is, and so it does, and so it must change somewhere between here. Then why don't I taste it? Because you can't taste it because it's divine. Blah, 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 blah. Just take it for what it was. He was saying, this was something this way. I'm giving it a whole new meaning. You think of me when this happens. And whenever you do it together and you all take it in, this is the body that was broken for you. Yes, somebody had a hand up. Joyce.
Perfect place for him to do that, because every element of the Passover meal represents something. The salt water represents tears.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. So they would have gotten that right away. They didn't
Yeah.
understand why he was saying it was his blood.
Yeah. Yeah, this is my blood. Although he has said, before I suffer, and the looks on their faces earlier was like, what? Some got it. John got it. See, from John's, the youngest one there probably, who lived the longest, who wrote the most deeply profound theological letters in the New Testament, in my estimation. I don't want to take anything away from the Apostle Paul, but it's a different kind of spirituality. John got it. Philip got it. The rest of them were really puzzled. Peter was just incredulous. He didn't know what to think of it. Matthew was just confused about all of it. Because who knows what Matthew was thinking. But everything comes down to this, and suddenly he gives them something, and I got the feeling that you'll understand. You can't understand right now. And that must have been what Jesus was thinking too. If I tell you the whole plan and everything, you'll stop it. You'll thwart it. You won't be able to handle it. and God's plan won't follow through. Well, that theme goes all the way through everybody. Let's go on now to, did you know when Mary Magdalene, scene 2, got kidnapped, did you know she was going to wind up in the house of Nicodemus in the middle of the night? When he turned around in episode 5, and it was him, and then it all flooded back to me. Their backstory dates back to the first season, you remember? When she had demon possession, and she was living in a cow pen indoors, and was horribly tortured and tormented. And he came, Nicodemus, who was a visiting grand poobah rabbi from Jerusalem, but up in Capernaum, they gathered and said, you can help. So he went there to exorcise the demon, remember? And was an utter failure. And he could not believe it. But then he saw her walking around days later, her hair combed, clean, in nice clothes, speaking, and he couldn't believe it. Who did this to you? And that's when he began to learn about Jesus. And she didn't know much to tell him. Just the one who saved me is right over there. And so everything comes full circle. Why did Nicodemus kidnap her and bring her to him in the middle of the night? Why?
To warn, tell her to send a warning to the apostle, to Jesus. Stop it, they're gonna.
And why was she a target? Because she had been looking for him.
Yes.
She was looking for him to say, I don't know what's going on here, but maybe Nicodemus can help. He's powerful. People respect him. He'll go if he can calm the Sanhedrin down. Because in that conversation, she said, he seems to be making an enemy of everyone he sees right now. He's not trying to get along. He's not trying to smooth the path. He goes out of his way to antagonize the Jewish leadership. He pokes them, and then he pokes them again, and then he slaps them so he can poke them while they're not looking. And they're beside themselves because don't you know who they are? Which is part of the problem. She wants from him, please, in your power, you can calm them down. What's his response? Oh, no. It's beyond me. I can't do that. What does he want from her? Tell Jesus to calm down. You people are he's going to destroy himself, and you people are going along with him if you don't back off. But he will not come ahead and go all the way. He was the one who came as a wise man in the middle of the night and said, we all know who you are. Years ago. You're he. And he and Jesus had that interaction. She has been forever transformed by Jesus. And you can see that in this meeting. Partly because she just is radiant. She glows. And he is still puzzled. He's an aging man. He's now got a cane. Been several years. He's been off teaching in Bethel for a long, long time. And he comes back and you find that he can't stand being in the Sanhedrin. It's like every committee meeting you've ever been in. On steroids. But they stand there together and she says, why won't you do something? Oh, I can't. It's beyond me. Besides, I don't really quite know who he is. She said, you saw who he was. And who else is standing there beside him? His manservant, his number one guy. And what's his name? Matthias. And you get the idea that Nicodemus, from a distance, in his own way, has been studying scriptures for the last 3 years. It's not just a new pursuit. This bug has burrowed itself into his brain. He will not get rid of Jesus. He can't. Every time he thinks the pompous clothing that he wears and the position